How's everybody doing today? Welcome to the video. Today we are going to be talking about the exposure triangle, what it means, and how it can help you get out of auto into manual and start being more creative and artistic with your photos. Let's get going. Before we get into these individually, I just want to kind of go over how a camera works basically in very rudimentary terms, just so everyone gets an understanding of what these things, this exposure triangle, what these three things do when we get into them a little bit more. So inside your camera, there is a sensor, and that sensor senses light, essentially. So light bounces off my face, gets projected back into the camera, and that's the image that you are seeing on the screen right now. This all has to do with light. Everything has to do with the light, how much there is, how much is getting through, and so on and so forth. So there's how sensitive the sensor is to the light, how much light is getting to that sensor, and for how long the light is being projected onto the sensor. So, first one, ISO. ISO refers to how sensitive that sensor is. Essentially, the higher the number, the more sensitive it is. The lower the number, the less sensitive it is. When you get into those high numbers, you create what's called noise in your photo. And it's these little blue and red specks all over the photo that you can probably see here on this image, and it's generally unwanted. Very rare circumstances do you really want that. I can hardly think of any, but some people put a similar thing called grain into their photo to give it like an old look, but that's a different subject. Essentially, for the most part, you're gonna want the ISO as low as a number as you can get out of your camera. So that's ISO. The lower the number, the cleaner it is, the less sensitive to light the sensor is. The higher the number, 800, 1600, 3200, 6400, so on and so forth, the more sensitive the sensor is to light, and but also the more noise and those dots that you're introducing into your photo. There's pretty much two trains of thought on this. Some people hate noise and they won't even take the photo because they hate noise that much. Other people don't care and would rather have the photo, so they take it anyways and just deal with the noise that's on their photo. The choice is totally up to you. There's no right or wrong answer. This is an art form and nothing is right or wrong. It just is what it is. So you choose what you want to do. Have the noise, get the photo. Don't have the noise, don't get the photo. That's your choices, or get better class. The next thing we're going to talk about is how much light is getting to the sensor. And that has to do with your aperture, which are these little blades, they call them, inside of the lens that make the hole bigger and smaller inside of the lens of your camera. The strange thing, this is a really strange thing about photography, but the smaller the number, which is referred to as an F number, so let's say f1.4, that's a really, really small number, the bigger the opening is in the lens. It's this way because it's based off of a mathematic formula, you know, how, like, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's based off of some mathematic formula, so that's why it's the opposite of what you would think. The bigger the number, so F11, F13, F22, the smaller the hole is in there. So at a wide opening, a wide aperture, a smaller number, F1.4, there's a lot of light being let in to get to the sensor. At a higher number, F13, 16, 22, so on and so forth, the smaller the hole is, and the less light that's getting onto the sensor. So the thing that changes when you open or close that hole in the lens is what's referred to as the depth of field. The depth of field is how much is in focus from front to back. It doesn't mean like the image, from left to right or anything. Like my hands are all in focus here. But if like you look at this plant right here, it's a little blurry. It's not in focus and I am in focus. So the depth of field is a little shallow on this because this plant is all out of focus. In this image here, this image was shot at f1.4. And you can see the background is just completely blown out. You can't really tell what this is. And then this image was shot at f13. You can tell it's just a painting. This is just some print that I had laying around to give this example. So that is aperture and how it affects the light entering your camera and what you can do with it artistically. Many people like shooting at a lower f number or wide aperture to get that shallow depth of field. You can get really creative with it. Generally speaking, that shows that you have a nicer camera, although nowadays these phone cameras are getting pretty good with like portrait mode where it's doing that in an artificial way. Whoops. It's doing that in an artificial way. It's blurring everything around you and it's using software to, cut around your face and get just your face and everything else is blurred out. In a DSLR or mirrorless camera, it's doing that naturally. That's just what happens inside the lens to the sensor. I'm not sure why. It's really weird, but it's also really cool. And that just happens naturally. That's just the way photography is versus in these new phones that are doing it artificially with software that doesn't always get it right all the time. Usually looks pretty good, but doesn't get it quite right all the time. So that is aperture, how much light is getting into the sensor. The third and final stop on the exposure triangle is the shutter speed. And so that is how long the light is hitting that sensor. So your shutter opens, light comes in, your shutter closes, and light stops coming in. So you can get what's called motion blur. So if you take a picture of, let's say, like somebody on a swing, they start at the top and they swing and your shutter's open from when they are here to when they are here, that's gonna be blurry. You're gonna see all of them because it's essentially like recording in that one frame that whole time. So like in this photo here, I believe I had the shutter open for 1/4 of a second. I rolled this ball and you can see that it's blurry. It recorded in this one frame from the start to the finish, from when it opened to when it closed. Everything else is nice and sharp because nothing else was moving. So this only affects things that are moving. This photo, I rolled the ball the exact same way. It was the exact same speed, but my shutter speed was much higher. So it did it so fast, it was open and closed so fast that it was able to freeze this ball in place. So you can get artistic with this with, if you want that, if you're taking a picture of a sunset over a lake and there's a swing in front of it off of a tree, you could put somebody on there and have some motion blur and that person swinging, and then with a nice sunset background. There's other ways you can have fun with motion blur. You can look up, it's how you would light paint and things of that nature. So just essentially, while the shutter is open, light is being recorded onto the sensor. So if there's movement, that will be recorded and will come out blurry. If you're having trouble with blurry photos and you're not sure why, try increasing your shutter speed. That might fix it, because even at an okay shutter speed, like tiny hand movements on a slower shutter speed will give you a blurry photo. It makes that big of a difference. So Try upping your shutter speed if you're having blurry photos. So that is the exposure triangle, how it affects your photos, what you can do with it, how you can get artistic with it. Hopefully this gets you out of auto into manual and practicing more. This stuff is not too difficult once you get used to it. It might be a struggle at first, but if you're coming out with really dark photos, drop that F number, get that aperture wide open, pump your ISO up, get it really high, 800, 1600, 3200, 6400 if you have to, and slow that shutter speed down as slow as you can to where you're okay with whatever motion blur is happening. If you are getting pictures that are just way too bright and you want to get them darker and more manageable, increase the shutter speed. Get that shutter speed up 500, 1000, 2000. Lower that ISO to 100. Pump that F number, that aperture, close that down, make that a little bit smaller. Personally, I keep my ISO as low as possible because I don't want that noise if I can avoid it. And then the next thing I will adjust is my shutter speed, unless I'm going for some light painting or something like that, but generally I don't, me personally. And the last thing that I will adjust is my aperture. I really like that creamy background, that blown out background, that blurriness in the back. I really enjoy that. That's one of my favorite personal things about photography. Unless of course I'm doing like a landscape and you want the whole thing in focus, you want to raise that F number up so that everything is in focus from what's right in front of you to what's in the very back of that photo. I hope you learned something. Hope this gets you out. Get out there, practice, do it often. If you like photography, practice. Try manual, try this. Your camera won't bite. The only way you're gonna get better and get used to it and get used to these things is practicing. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you in the next video.